I discussed on the program yesterday a growing awareness, a growing concern of a potential Cold War with China. China's top diplomat was in Moscow yesterday, clearly sowing seeds against the West. The Pentagon announced today it will markedly increase the number of troops deployed to Taiwan, more than quadrupling the current number. Have we entered a new phase in this standoff with China? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Nathaniel Moran. He serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the House Education Committee, and the House Judiciary Committee. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Texas. Congressman, welcome to Washington Watch.
Tony, thank you for having me. This is my first time to be with you, and it is a deep pleasure. I so appreciate all the truth that you are making sure gets out on the airwaves and through the television stations these days.
Well, I appreciate that. And you're new to Congress. You took the seat that our good friend Louis Gohmert had, but you're already serving on multiple important committees. I mean, Foreign Affairs Committee, that is an important committee, Judiciary Committee. So you've got some important assignments. Tell us about what you hope to accomplish before we get into the topics for today. Just kind of your passion and your goals as you come to Washington to represent the 1st District of Texas.
Well, I'll start with talking about my role in the Education Committee because of the clip you played at the top of the hour. I, like many parents, was probably astounded by the fact that somebody would stand at the podium and say parents should not have a right in the say of their education of their kids. The first committee hearing we had 2 weeks ago for the Education Committee, I cited a unanimous opinion from 1925, where the Supreme Court said in Pierce versus Society of Sisters that parents have a fundamental right to direct the upbringing, the religious training of their kids. And it's astonishing to me today that we are not seeing that fulfilled, that we're in fact seeing parents excluded from the boardrooms and from the decision making of the education of their kids. So that's one of the things that I really want to get done here at the federal level, is to get rid of the Department of Education. It's not something that's constitutional for us to be dealing with. It should be a state's issue, and more importantly, it should be something that parents are at the center of.
Well, we will join you in that effort. Look forward to working with you to return God has given the authority and the responsibility of educating children to parents. And we want to make sure that the power remains in the hands of parents, and we look forward to joining you in that effort. Let me ask you about this. Vladimir Putin's national address this week appeared to confirm the war in Ukraine is not ending anytime soon. Yesterday, top diplomat from China there in Moscow. Are we entering a new phase of this war in Ukraine?
I certainly believe so. Make no mistake that this war in Ukraine is about more than just the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and about more than just that geographic region. Truly, this is becoming a proxy conflict between the United States and China, the two dominant superpowers economically throughout the world. And what most people seem to forget in this conflict is, look, if we can't push back hard against Russian imperialism and Russian aggression in this instance, we're going to see greater issues that we're going to have to deal with down the line by a growing axis of evil, that being Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, those entities and those countries that say, we don't want freedom, we don't want individual liberties, and we're going to capture the rest of the world and push our agenda on them. And so we've got to understand that we have to push the Russians back out of Ukraine. And if we don't, we're going to end up in a situation where there's greater conflict to deal with and greater responsibility that we're going to have to take on. So there's lots to deal with when we get within the minutia of how we should deal with the Ukraine conflict. No doubt we need more accountability on the weapons that we're sending over there and the money that's being sent over there. We certainly need more accountability for all of the taxpayer dollars that are being spent. Truly, I'd like to see us take the money that's been captured by the Russian oligarchs and use that money instead of the American taxpayer money to fund what needs to happen in Ukraine. But listen, the Russian invasion here, it won't stop at Ukraine. If we don't stop them, if we don't help the Ukrainians stop, it's going to continue through other countries.
You know, it's very interesting. You see how history repeats itself. This time, the Cold War is not necessarily with Russia. It appears to be China and Russia. When we were in Afghanistan years ago, back in the 80s, that was kind of a proxy war that was taking place there. Now, Russia is the proxy of China. It, could be. I mean, it looks like it's developing that way. I do not support this administration's policies domestically, and they've been very weak in their foreign policy, withdrawing from Afghanistan. But I do want to give the president credit where credit is due. I think it was a good move to go to Ukraine this week and stand with the president there in Ukraine. I also think it's interesting that the U.S. has hosted top diplomats from Taiwan this week in Washington, D.C., which is also a significant break with the past, and I think sends a very strong message to China.
Yes, it certainly does. And we need to send that strong message because, as I said, if we're not going to push back hard, if we don't push back hard on this Russian-Ukrainian conflict, we're going to see a growing conflict between China and Taiwan. China already believes that we're weak. I do agree. I appreciate the president's trip to Ukraine and appreciate his strong words this week. But this may be, unfortunately, a little bit too late because we need to have steady, strong, and strategic foreign policy leading up to today that he has just simply not been willing to do until he's pushed to do that by those of us in Congress that are voicing our concerns. So we need to be proactive in that steady, that strong, and that strategic foreign policy dominance worldwide so that we don't get to a military conflict. We don't want to see that. So when we look back, it's interesting you make that comparison of the Cold War. When you look back at how we won the Cold War, a lot of it had to do with us defeating the Russians economically. And that's part of our problem right now is we're not economically dominating the world. We're letting the Chinese do that. Economic policy will lead to foreign policy, which will prevent a military conflict. We need to be the leaders in this world economically.
Extremely important point, and we're actually giving them money. We're sending our money to China to bolster their regime. And this is something I talk about frequently on this program. In my former capacity as the chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, I was sanctioned by China for speaking out against their human rights abuses. And I talk about how each one of us can practice or take a part in this by simply refusing to buy products that come from China, because every time we're buying products from China, we're bolstering the Communist Party there.
That's right. We are. And as you said, there's a perspective here that goes deeper than just the physical world that we're dealing with. It's a spiritual battle. And those of us in the evangelical Christian world, we know that we want to spread the gospel throughout this world. We do that by having influence and allowing freedom in other countries. But if we allow China to dominate other countries, the African continent, the South American continent in particular, think about how hard it is for the gospel to spread in those instances, how hard it will be for us to have missionaries in those locations if they become captive economically and from a foreign policy standpoint to China. We just can't allow that to happen. We have to be leaders in this world because we are that shining light on the hill. We're that shining city that's going to proclaim there is freedom in this world, and it begins with the United States example.
You are absolutely correct. Congressman Moran, I want to thank you for joining us today. Great to have you on the program. Look forward to following up with you real soon on that education issue. We want to talk about that with you as well.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.